I'm in love with the South. So I've decided to spend the next 7 weeks leaving Bluff and doing a massive circumnavigation of the South Island.
This episode, I'm heading to New Zealand's southwesternmost corner, then getting on a boat and heading north through the fjords.
This is South.
Okay, punters, this is where the journey gets interesting. So mates and I are going from here at Waitutu Lodge. We're going to bush crash our way to New Zealand's windiest spot at Pusaka Point, picking up a boat there, then going in and out of the fjords to discover some of New Zealand's history, Captain Cook history. We'll end up in Doubtful Sound. Sounds doubtful, doubtful we'll make it. This is an extraordinarily hard tramp. My mates Robin and Renee have come along. Robin has wanted to do it for about 25 years, but has put it off because of the difficulty, and I've wanted to do it for about 8 years to see what it was like for the pioneers and to look for the telephone cable that connects the lighthouse to civilization.
Actually, I don't care what I'm gonna say. I'm just quite glad to have a chance to stop and talk. Yeah, it's tough, and this is not a trek. There is no trek. There are no huts. This is Frontierland. This is pioneering.
And although this literally is a walk in the park, it isn't a walk in the park if you know what I mean. This is the hardest and toughest thing I've ever done in my life.
After that hill though, gee, I tell you what, I'd rather eat my own vomit than bring it back up and heat it and chop it up with onions and eat it again. I mean, anything was better than that. I just thought I made the worst decision of my life. That's got to be good.
Robin was definitely the right guy to bring along. Keen tramper, also part-time propellerhead, he's brought along a mountain radio so we can keep in contact with civilization.
Cavendish River, over.
We've just crossed the Cavendish. And it's raining, so it's fjordland, so the river's up. If you knew what it was like, you wouldn't do it. So I had to climb across a tree to get across it. Robin was pretty happy to find the tree. It was tough, and of course there were many more rivers to cross, but as time went on, things, although very hard, became slightly easier, and at night, a slightly underwhelming fire helped warm us up. Day 3, change of scenery. It's not rivers, but windy, cold, snowy mountaintops. And actually, I think these conditions have buggered my skin.
I'm cut. My fingers are cut. It's taken me about 20 minutes to plaster everything. And my, because we've got monkey scrub, so I'm sort of cut to pieces.
Day 4, things are much, much, much easier. In fact, I've become the leader, and this is the day we get back down to the coast.
Three and a half days and we got back to the sea. And what's it? Spectacular.
For 4 days, we haven't seen or heard a soul. Then, lo and behold, we find 4 people living in a cave. Initially, the older couple looked like a rogue folk duo, and the younger ones looked like models for an outdoor catalogue. In reality, they're a couple of lawyers from the North Island with their 2 children who come here once a year to do God knows what. Anyway, they were a delight, and they offered us crayfish, Earl Grey tea and whiskey. I was unsure about the outdoor etiquette of accepting food from strangers, so I sought advice from Robin. He said, go for your life.
So it's 17 k's from where we are to Pusiga, and we're doing 5. And how far have we come? 15 k's?
Or yeah, a bit less than that.
But less than 15 in 4 days. God.
Then from here.
We're not going to get there.
No, yeah. We're about a day short.
Yeah.
So day 5, we've decided a helicopter is going to pick us up and I'm going to spend the day looking for the telephone cable that connected the lighthouse at Pusiga Point with civilization. We've only climbed for 5 minutes from where we actually decided to end the 5-day walk, and we've found this, heavier than I thought, and this is the phone line that went from Oropuki between Tuatapere and Invercargill all the way to Pusiga. So this was the phone line, how they talked to the lighthouse keeper. Of course, hardly ever worked because trees would fall down on it. And it was Fred Flutie, the powerhouse guy, it was his job to walk to Pusiga and back maintaining this line as well. So, yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing this line was here 70, 80 years ago. So as far as walking from Big River to Pusiga, we probably got halfway. What have I learned? I've learned that tramping in this countryside with no track, just going by compass, is hard. And this is a tramping trip after all, so we need some tramping humour. And Robin's bet me a bottle of whiskey I can't get naked amongst the sandflies for 5 minutes.
Are you happy with your hand placement, lad?
When I made this series, I wanted to really show or get a sense of not just going by jet boat or by chopper. I wanted to see what it was like for the pioneers. And it was tough. It's wet, steep, cold country. But for those guys, the prospectors and the surveyors, and Fred Flutie that maintained the line, I mean, they must have been hard men to be in here with old calico tents and axes and all that sort of stuff, because you couldn't get a mule through here. So that's it for me. I'm signing off because I can't talk much longer with these sandflies. Oh, Bromma Dick. It was all right, you can feel then they start chewing your sensitive skin. Oh, Jesus, I'm covered in blood. Yeah. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to actually, during this commercial break, I'm going to reappear at Pusiga. And that will have been by chopper and by boat.
On to the coastal forecast now. It's gale warnings for Milford and Pusiga. Storm.
Now, anyone that's ever listened to the weather in the South Island, every weather forecast starts with gale-force winds in Pusiga. And this is where they're talking about. Pusiga Point, it's very, very windy. And a lighthouse has been here since the 1880s, and the stories the lighthouse keepers have from this place are the stuff of absolute legend, stuff of remoteness and hardship. This is not the original lighthouse. The original lighthouse was wooden, but what happened is a guy moved here from a psychiatric hospital in Dunedin, and he lived down there on the island nearby, and he kept thinking someone was shining lights in his eyes, which is what happens when you move near a lighthouse, so he set light to it. So the original lighthouse got burnt down. This is the replacement. Of course, those sorts of people these days would be so medicated they wouldn't leave their council flat, but in those days, when you're nuts, you move to a place as remote as this. I normally get invigorated by depressing remote places, but this is not invigorating. This is a hard, lonely, angry sort of a place. And it must have been a very tough place for the lighthouse families. I think there are normally 2 families here and their kids. They'd get visited by the electoral officer to vote, by the correspondence school to drop off correspondence papers. I suppose occasionally the team from Spot On would drop in to do a series for the kids' shows on lighthouse children's families, but that would be it. Very, very remote. It was demanned in the late 1980s, so now there is no one for 10s, 20s, 30 kilometres around here, although occasionally maintenance crews will chopper in to maintain the lighthouse. Still a very, very important navigational aid. I'm glad I came, but I'm not coming back. It was very, very hard to get here. Yeah, it's been a real trial. Well, I've turned a corner now, and I'm getting on the Milford Wanderer, and I'm going up past Dusky, Breaksea, Dag Sound, into Doubtful Sound, and onto Te Anau. Well, the boat. Let's get one thing perfectly clear. The best thing about this boat is there's no foreigners. I hate to sound judgmental, but none of your pesky know-it-all Americans, none of your colonial British, none of your pretty robot-like Swedes, just none of your annoying foreign people. It's all New Zealanders, and that's very, very rare in a tourist venture now. But this, going around the countryside
around New Zealand waters by boat is absolutely phenomenal. The boat sinks about 36. The fjords and the landscape and the atmosphere is absolutely, it's just a, you know, they say about going on a cruise boat, you don't have to unpack because you've got all your goods with you in your room, and that's quite true. But the boat, the meals, the food, the stuff, and they're all New Zealanders.
Preservation Inlet has no permanent residents, but it wasn't always that way. In the 1700s, sealers and whalers lived here, and in the late 1800s, Fiordland had its own case of gold fever. 3 gold mines sprung up in this remote wilderness. The largest was the Morning Star mine at Te Oniroa, where a small township flourished. It was relatively sophisticated, a wharf was built, they even had a library. There's not much left here now, though.
And this is one of the few man-made artefacts left in Fiordland. This is the boiler for the Morning Star mine. So this would have burnt coal or wood. I don't know where they would have got the coal from, but this would have burnt coal to create power to drive the Stamper battery, to crush the quartz, to extract the gold, all in the 1890s, so this is 120 years old. Hell to get in here, horse and drays, and God knows how they'd get this in ships with that swell, but yep. If there's gold, there's certainly a will to get it out. I'd say you've got to be hardy, but actually you've got to be quite old, because all the people on my trip appear to be pensioners, and you've got to hand it to them. They'll leave those young ones. I mean, they're up at dawn and they're in boats and they're in boots and they're tramping, and they're fantastic. Don't be afraid of the old people. So the old people have got spark.
Thank you, Marcus.
Yeah, okay. I'm not seasick. I don't tend to get seasick at the moment, but I have I get nervous on the water. Just, I think, probably all those disaster movies with the skipper not knowing what to do and the swells coming in. But spending all this time on the water on this trip, I feel a lot more comfortable. I actually really enjoyed it. There's something, I've always felt the call of the sea. I was just too scared to answer. So I'm absolutely loving it.
Anyway, enough about me, now about moose. Here in Dusky Sound in 1902, 10 moose were released into the wild. They struggled because red deer seemed to eat all their food. The last photo of a moose in New Zealand was taken in 1952, and it was then thought they were extinct. But in 1972, a suspected sighting caused a huge fuss and a moose hunt was launched. Ken Tustin was a young scientist in the Forest Service who eagerly led the search.
A group of 4 of us spent 11 weeks in Dusky Wet Jacket Resolution area, and we came up with the answer yes. To our surprise, even it took us 9 weeks before we found a sign that we considered acceptable.
Unfortunately, they hadn't actually seen a moose, so no one really believed them.
We had one thing which was beyond a judgment, if you like. We found a cast antler. Well, there's a lot of information in a cast antler. It tells you that a living moose, in this case, a 3-year-old bull, stood on a beach in Wet Jacket Arm, and one of his antlers fell off, and we found it a year later. So there, with that find alone, we'd shifted moose presence from 1952 to 1971, at least. But the evidence generally still wasn't acceptable to most people. So
But the helicopter boys hadn't seen any moose?
No.
Okay.
It doesn't surprise me.
Okay.
Does a little bit.
Not one to give up, Ken has had hidden cameras taking photos since the 90s.
In 1995, when Natural History Unit were working with us on the project, we believe we got a moose photograph there, but it's blurry enough to be able to be challenged and not for us to really not be able to insist that it's a moose.
But wait, there's more. If blurry photos aren't enough for you, there's also DNA evidence from hair samples.
When we find moose browse, or what we call suspect moose browse on a bush, maybe a fuchsia that's broken in a particular way, we'll search it for snagged hair.
And a hair from an original moose would rot in the wet. It's not going to last a season.
The scientists tell us it'll last about a month if
Okay.
it's suspended. So What we're really saying is
That's proof.
a living moose stood in Shark Cove in 2001, and a living moose stood in Wet Jacket Arm here in 2002 on a beach.
Why is it important to you, Ken, that there are moose? Or there aren't?
One of the things that drives us is that we're able to say here in 2009, there's still some lovely mysteries out there. And hey kids, you know, sure, have your cell phone and your television programs and so on, but there's still some lovely stuff to do in the bush, and you can do it the same as anyone else. So that's important to us.
This is my bunk. I sleep well at sea. There's just me and Andrew, the sound guy. I've never slept at sea, but it's good. I've got my own porthole, and that closes. Makes it quite dark. And the water line's about there, and that's quite nice. It's like you're just sleeping on top of the water, and very, very cosy. Even as good as a train sleeping on a boat. All the carpet's quite tartany, don't know why that is. I haven't slept in very, very rough seas, but I imagine I probably could as well.
This part of Fiordland used to be alive with bird song. It must have been remarkable to hear the booming of the kakapo, but once the Europeans came to this country, something tragic happened.
Europeans came to New Zealand, they missed the animals of home, they introduced rabbits. The rabbits, after a while, went rampant. To get rid of the rabbits, they introduced stoats and weasels. That was a disaster, because the stoats and weasels didn't like to eat the rabbits, they liked to eat the native birds, the kakapo and the kiwi.
Enter Richard Henry, the pioneer of New Zealand conservation, who could see that the native birds would soon become extinct. He lobbied the government for the establishment of a sanctuary here on Resolution Island, and he took on the job as caretaker.
So what do you know about his life here?
Well, it was a very hard life for starters. He was here for just under 15 years in total, and a very poor salary, and a man, you know, well ahead of his time in regards to conservation thinking, when the general attitude, of course, was the natural world was a resource to be consumed, really. Well, his house was very substantial.
Was it?
Yep.
Or you've been ironic?
No.
Oh, was it?
Oh, it was had a kitchen 20 by 10 feet, 2 bedrooms 10 by 10 feet. Unfortunately, during the Second World War, they wanted the scrap iron for the roof, so they came and pulled it down.
So the whole time was just going around up and down the fjords, trapping kakapo? How do you trap them?
His dog would essentially sniff them out. He pioneered the whole art of live capture, so a muzzled dog to sniff them out, because they've got a very strong scent. Very well camouflaged. You can be within a metre of a kakapo and not see it, but the dog would point it, he'd capture it, put it in a cage, he'd bring it back here, and we do have the punga pen just a bit further around the island. He'd collect all his wildlife, and then he'd move them as a job lot to points he thought were relevant around Resolution Island.
And no one had thought of those safe islands before?
No, he pioneered the whole thing. So a visionary, really.
But after 14 years and having transferred 700 kakapo, the fateful day came when he discovered a stoat on the island. His hard work had come to nothing. Richard Henry left his home near Resolution Island and took a job on Kapiti Island for a while before retiring to Helensville. He died in poverty, and only the postmaster attended the funeral.
Has he got the credit he's deserved?
Well and truly now, I think, yes. I think history puts an interesting spin on it. 100 years ago, he would have been a crackpot, a weirdo, a crank. But it's funny how a bit of time, visionary, yeah. I think, in a way, you know, the spirit lives on here. This is the birthplace of New Zealand's conservation, full stop.
So I suppose that's the most significant thing, is that we live in fragile ecosystems, and if you are going to introduce some sort of species, it's probably worthwhile putting some sort of forethought into it. And actually, reading back in the old papers from the day when they brought the ferrets and stoats across, people told them they were crazy, that they were going to eat the native birds, so they were forewarned. It seems as though our history is predicated on acts of great stupidity.
And further along Dusky Sound, another spot of historical significance.
This is Observation Point in Dusky Sound, which is a fjord. Captain Cook came here in a second boat, the Resolution. He came up here, chopped down a whole lot of trees,
to put his observatory here. He wanted an observatory because he wanted to work out at what longitude they were, to work out whether his fancy chronometers, his fancy watches, worked, basically. Let me explain more. Cut explanation piece. Okay, latitude and longitude explained with an orange and 2 toothpicks.
If you don't know how far you are around the world, you can get into all sorts of strife. You could bump into rocks and other ships, or even your ex-wife. So Captain Cook took a clock that could work at sea, that told the time back at home, then went off to a sound called Dusky to see how far he had come. He measured the time from the midday sun, and the answer was unfurled. He said, "Chaps, there is no short way back. We're on the other side of the world."
So the whole key was having an accurate watch on the ship that was telling you the time back home in Greenwich. Greenwich, Dusky Sound where I am. And funnily enough, oranges were quite useful, Captain Cook as well. He took oranges to stop them getting scurvy. So there you go. There's 2 historical lessons.
I'm not speechless, but I almost am. This journey has been astonishing. The walk to Pusaga, the walk almost to Pusaga, was as difficult as anything I've ever done. And like most difficult things, it was the most rewarding thing we've ever done. It was absolutely astonishing. Pusaga, the lighthouse, to me, that's always symbolised a remote and windswept corner of New Zealand. It was exactly that. It was very remote. It was very windswept. It was superb. And the boat trip from there to here has just been out at sea, was rough and wild, and in the fjords was calm and beautiful. It was amazing. The whole trip has been as good as anything I've ever done. It's just been marvellous. Windy, but marvellous.